I see my name in shining lights. Yeah, a different city every night. Oh, I swear the world better prepare for when I'm a billionaire.
It's time to get down to business on the weekend's #1 business program. Known as the King of Networking, your host, Shalom Klein, has worked with thousands of entrepreneurs and created countless jobs. So, to success. Let's get down to business.
And indeed, we are all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship in business. We talk a lot about business here. You're on with Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts from Get Down to Business on my website at shalomklein.com. And while you're there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. It's going to be a jam-packed week of content and information you will not want to miss. So let's jump right in. I'm so excited to be joined by Dr. Victoria Grady, a co-author of Stuck, How to Win at Work by Understanding Loss. Dr. Grady is also the president of Pivot Point and a research consultant. And very, very excited to have Victoria Grady on the program. Welcome to Get Down to Business.
Thank you, Shalom. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you for having us, hosting our book. We're excited to talk about it.
Absolutely. It's a great topic because we know that transformation is never easy. But I love the title of the book, How to Win at Work by Understanding Loss, because the way I see it from reading some excerpts from the book, it's about focusing on what matters. So, indeed, there are many ways to be stuck in an organization. Victoria, I'd love to first start by understanding your background and what got you so passionate about this topic.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it so much, Shalom. And it's a fun story. So while I was working on my master's degree back in the late 90s, I found myself working in a space with IT folks, right? So we were working on new technology integration in the United States, and I found that people were often pushing back on learning the technology when the technology was actually going to make their life easier. So I thought that was a curious scenario. Moved to Europe, and I lived in Europe for a couple of years, and I found the same scenario in Europe, and I was perplexed by why technology integration that, again, was going to make life easier, work tasks more quickly accomplished, there was so much pushback. And as I began to research and understand more about the behavioral implications of that scenario, I had the opportunity to work with a guy named Jerry Harvey as I began my doctoral studies. And Dr. Harvey had a really interesting perspective on this, that it was related to our instinct, our biological instinct to resist losing proximity or connection to specific objects. And it was a light bulb that went off, Shalom, and I was excited to be exposed to this information, and I just became obsessed, if some might say, with understanding this from the technology perspective. Then I realized that it fed over into other areas as well.
Absolutely. No, fascinating story indeed. And there's no question that as folks start to again, figure out what the new normal looks like. And if I had a penny for every time that term was thrown around, I'd be a rich, rich man. But new normal is indeed what it is, because our workplaces will frankly never be the same as they were, whether it's pre-pandemic, but honestly, that's just a point in time. But in your book, you talk about a theory called the attachment theory and attachment behavior. Can you sort of briefly sort of explain what those two things are and why business owners tuning in to Get Down to Business need to understand it?
So attachment behavior is the theory I was referring to that my wonderful colleague Jerry Harvey exposed me to. And basically the essence of attachment is that we as human beings, all human beings, have a instinctual predisposition to attach to objects for support. So it's basically objects can be tangible or intangible mechanisms to provide support as you go through change and transition. The really interesting part of this, Shalom, is that it starts when you're an infant, right? And so some people might remember Linus and his blanket. This isn't so dissimilar from Linus and his blanket, right? Now, I'm not hypothesizing that leaders and individuals and organizations carry around a blanket, but a blanket of sorts. Right? Because they have different objects. It could be a leader, it could be a technology, it could be a business process that provide them with that support to help them feel that consistency as they transition from one state to a new state. Does that make sense, Shalom?
It does, and that's so important, and definitely, again, more relevant than ever. So I love to leave our listeners with some real actionable sort of advice and things that they should be thinking about. So when you're talking to a business owner that, small business owners in Chicago or anywhere around the world, what are some of the things that they should think about as it relates to sort of attachment objects? Does everyone really have one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say 99.9% of the population on the globe do have one. So there is definitely a small percentage of individuals around the globe that maybe don't, because it's never 100%, right? But the majority of us, the overwhelming majority of us, do have an attachment object. And it's really interesting for leaders inside of organizations. It's important to try to define how you might identify those attachment objects, because they're always different, Shalom. And it doesn't matter if you are a leader or a custodial individual working for an organization. We all have those. And it's important that leadership understand that we have to make sure we acknowledge the need to identify those. So one of the ways that we found is really important acknowledgement of those transitional objects is related to choice. When people have a choice, they feel more empowered to be able to move forward inside of the organization and support it. That power of choice gives an individual that support that they often need to transition through change. And we saw that overwhelmingly during the pandemic. Does that make sense, Shalom?
It does, and I appreciate it very, very much. Again, I'm chatting with Dr. Victoria Grady, co-author of Stuck, How to Win at Work by Understanding Loss. We've been having a great conversation about attachment theory and attachment behavior. And Victoria, I know you, together with your co-author, Patrick, you wrote this book, and it's got some really, really solid advice. And in a couple of minutes, we'll make sure to send people over to your website so they can make sure they get a copy of the book. But tell us a little bit about that experience of putting together the advice about transformation. I mean, really how to break through the plateau, if you will. And I know your book is less about theory and more about action. So let's talk about some of those things and what people can expect if they pick up a copy of the book.
So they could definitely expect the action items. This book is written as kind of a field guide, right? So each chapter is focused on a specific area around attachment behavior to help the individual, not just the leader, Shalom, but also it could be a supervisor, a manager, even a colleague, help their co-workers transition through change. That's really what we're talking about when we talk about loss, right? We're talking about change, whether it is going from a face-to-face environment that we all pivoted from so quickly in March of 2020 to a purely virtual environment to now as we pivot back to something that's more of a hybrid environment, right? And we figure out what our organization is going to be able to support in terms of going forward. It's just important to recognize that those are critical areas that we have to support our employees as they move through and throughout different pieces or components of org change.
Oh, fantastic. Absolutely. So again, the book is called Stuck, How to Win at Work by Understanding Loss. And it's a great read. And so what is the one thing, and obviously I don't want to share any secrets from the book, but what is the one thing that people remember nothing else in the week ahead that they could put into action as it relates to some of the areas of expertise in Stuck, How to Win at Work by Understanding Loss?
I think the one thing I would say is that we all are predisposed to need connection, right? We all need to feel like we are connected to our organization, whether it's we're working in a hybrid format or we're working, back face to face with our colleagues. We need to feel connected to them. And I think overwhelmingly that connection is a tough one when you're working in a virtual or a hybrid environment. But we're watching organizations around the globe do a really good job with making sure that their employees feel connected with everything from, afternoon happy hours via Zoom or social events that are more back in person. Maybe they host things that are outside, but it's that feeling of connection that I would say to leaders around the globe need to make sure they put that in place as a critical component of the organizational culture going forward.
Well, I've certainly learned a lot in this conversation. That's great advice. We talk about that really, really every week about staying connected and that's certainly a constant. That hasn't changed in the pandemic. Definitely that need for connection, that need for team building, whether it's with customers, employees, so critical. So Victoria, I really enjoyed our conversation. I want to make sure our listeners know how they can pick up a copy of the book and get in touch with you. Can you share that information?
Great. So probably the easiest way to find the book is via Amazon. So if you just type in "Stuck" and Victoria Grady, it pops right up at the top of the list. And you could also visit our website at www.pivotpnt.com. So that's pivotpivot.com.
Fantastic. Dr. Victoria Grady, co-author of Stuck, How to Win at Work by Understanding Loss, as well as certainly the president of Pivot Point, pivotpnt.com. We'll be right back on Get Down to Business. Lots more small business content, good information for you when we return after this quick break.